All right, let me take some more questions. Yes.
A lot of the people I talk to, including my introduction to cryptography professor, say like, oh, Bitcoin's just a thing that the illegal market uses. This is kind of more along the same lines. And a lot of the people that I talk to are afraid to even talk about it with their friends in case like some situation does happen where the government says, oh, it's illegal to own this. We're going to confiscate this now if you own some Bitcoin. So I don't know if you just want to shed some.
Yeah, so some people are afraid of talking about Bitcoin because it's related to illegal activities, and I mean, this is the exact same spiel we heard on the internet in the early days. It's a den of thieves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. First of all, if the government decides to ban cryptocurrencies, they're going to discover something interesting. Cryptocurrencies are now owned by corporations, and corporations with money are the last entity in this country that has due process of law. The rest of us lost it a long time ago, but corporations still have it. So when they try to ban it, they're going to get sued, and that lawsuit is going to progress. One of the big companies in San Francisco has investment of $25 million by one of the biggest venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. If Bitcoin was banned, do you think they'd sue? I think they'd sue. How many lawyers can you buy with $5 billion of capital under management? A lot of lawyers. And so they sue. And they take it to the state court. And then finally they take it to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court, currency has already been declared a means of speech under Citizens United. And the Supreme Court actually pays attention, given enough money and really good case, to the Constitution, which actually says things about expression and freedom of speech that they have directly related in precedent to currency. So the government at that point risks something really bad, and that is that they lose at the Supreme Court. And if they lose at the Supreme Court after trying to make cryptocurrency illegal, that means by precedent that it is now legally protected speech. And they will not take that risk. Because that would be a terrible precedent to set, because out of that flow a lot of other rights. So they would rather have cryptocurrencies in a somewhat gray area for a few more years until they can decide what to do about it. One of the things I love is that I've noticed that churches are now taking Bitcoin. Churches have one distinct advantage. They're mentioned twice in the First Amendment. First under speech, and then under establishment. Freedom of religion and freedom of speech in the form of money is very heavily protected for churches. So if Bitcoin were banned, I would collect a bunch of churches and a bunch of VCs, and I'd create a nice class action lawsuit with standing, and I'd take that all the way to the Supreme Court. So I don't think it's going to get banned. Now, it does get banned in countries where the rule of law is the rule of Putin. And something strange happens in those countries. When the rule of law is the rule of Putin, people don't pay attention to the law. They have no respect for the law. At some point in Russia, dollar ownership was banned. And at that point, every member of the Politburo was stuffing suitcases with dollars. And every member of the Russian armed forces was stuffing suitcases with dollars. And every financial regulator was stuffing suitcases with dollars. And everyone who could bribe someone who had power was stuffing suitcases with dollars. So Bitcoin's been banned. I expect right now a lot of very important people in Russia are stuffing wallets with Bitcoin. Here's another funny thing that happens when you try to ban a cryptocurrency. Altcoins and currencies express biological evolution properties. They operate as species in an environment defined by regulatory compliance and geography. In an evolutionary environment, when things are stable, evolution slows down. When you introduce disruption, evolution speeds up. If a country bans a cryptocurrency, what they do is they cut it off from the other cryptocurrencies. Guess what happens when you do that? Divergent evolution. It splits and morphs and evolves. You ban Bitcoin in Russia, what you're likely to do is create Russia coin. A coin that is uniquely suited to the new environmental niche in which you isolated it. One that speaks Russian, one that's stealthier, one that's designed to evade exactly the regulations that Russia has put in place to ban Bitcoin. So before you had Bitcoin, and now you have a much harder to control version of it. And if you try to stomp that, then you get 5 more. We've already seen this happen. It happened with peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer started with Napster. And Napster was the salamander of peer-to-peer networking, and they squished it underfoot. And so Kazaa evolved, and then Gnutella, and then OpenBox, and then eventually BitTorrent. Compared to Napster, the little salamander of peer-to-peer networking, BitTorrent is a Komodo dragon, and it's got big, scaly armor, and it can bite the head off a chicken. Now, in evolutionary terms, when you cut off an environment, species evolve to fit that environment perfectly. Billions of years ago, the continent of Australia separated from the rest of the world, and the species that were isolated on that continent found themselves in an arid wasteland with very few resources. They were banned from competing freely. They were limited in their ability to operate. So what did they do? They evolved. They evolved in this incredible burst of evolution where they developed venom, and they developed fangs, and they developed armor. And today, 90% of the venomous species in the world live in Australia. And they're pretty nasty. So what happens when Russia bans Bitcoin? They get a localized, Russian-speaking, venomous version of Bitcoin growing right inside their country. And if they stomp on it, they get 5 more that are much worse. So the nice thing about cryptocurrencies is that they exhibit biological evolution and are resistant to regulation. So I'm looking forward to how this plays out. In the end, a lot of the people who tried to stop Napster probably look back in retrospect and think, you know, if we'd added a bit of licensing and tried to make money off it, Napster would have been a hell of a lot nicer to live with than BitTorrent. In a decade, people will look back and say, you know what? Bitcoin was kind of benign. We should have stuck with that instead of creating all these venomous cryptocurrencies that grew out of trying to ban Bitcoin. All right, the other thing to remember is that when a country bans a cryptocurrency, a global cryptocurrency, what they do is they isolate themselves from the benefits of jobs and innovation and growth that that cryptocurrency creates. I remember back in the 90s there was a massive storm in the English Channel, and some of the English tabloids came out with this fantastically hubristic headline. Atlantic storm, Europe cut off from Britain. So when Russia bans Bitcoin, who loses? Bitcoin? Yeah, I don't think so. Russia loses. Because what they just lost is the ability to have legitimate businesses create real jobs and economic activity around one of the most exciting technologies since the internet right in their own country, and to have some growth in an economy that's stagnant. Bitcoin survives. Bitcoin continues as if nothing happened because there are a lot more places than Russia. All right, I'm going to take the last question for today. Who's got a question? No one. And okay, yes.
What do you think about, like, you know, contracts with platforms like Ethereum? What do you think they're going to do?
All right, that's a nice.
Poison. What kind of poison do you think it's going to be for
I hope we stick with relatively useful, benign cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin because they exhibit some of the best characteristics of cryptocurrency. Their primary focus is ease of transaction, liquidity, and flexibility. They're about enabling economic activity. They're not designed to evade, right? That's not what they're supposed to do. So I hope we don't go to stealth coin and Anani coin and, crypto coins that are much, much harder. There's a new platform called Ethereum, and Ethereum is really interesting because it's not actually a currency. It's a blockchain-based platform for contract law. It's a platform on which you can use a programming language to define self-executing contracts. Some of those contracts can be currencies. In fact, you can write many of the cryptocurrencies in about 5 lines of code on Ethereum. Some of those contracts can be distributed contracts that allow for exchanges where you can change one currency to another. Also very easy to implement. And here's one of the interesting things they can do. You can build something called a distributed autonomous corporation. A distributed autonomous corporation is a digital corporation without a board of directors. It's a digital corporation that is governed by an algorithm instead of a board, and that has shareholders who buy shares in it, just like they buy a cryptocurrency, and then they depend on the corporation acting in accordance with the algorithm that they can see right in the recipe that creates the corporation. Let me give you an example. A digital autonomous corporation could be used to do digital autonomous altruism or digital autonomous charity. Imagine a contract script that advertises and collects funds and then distributes them automatically in countries where there are natural disasters, and tracks that all through contributions by individual members in cryptocurrencies from all around the world, and provides complete transparency in its operations by publishing everything on an open, transparent ledger. You can run an NGO that is not only a non-governmental organization, it is a non-human organization. It is an algorithmic organization whose sole purpose is both visible and executed by its governance algorithm. Imagine a distributed altruistic corporation that collects fundraising amounts, and then when it sees the event of a hurricane in a developing nation, funds recovery and aid efforts directly by sending cryptocurrencies to that nation. Bitcoin is actually one of the first digital autonomous corporations, if you think about it. Bitcoin isn't just a currency, it's also an IPO. It's an IPO for the tech sectors of cryptocurrencies. And everyone who owns Bitcoin is a shareholder in this IPO. By owning a piece of Bitcoin, you own the entire cryptocurrency sector as it grows. And one of the reasons people have seen really nice returns with Bitcoin is because by acting as an autonomous corporation, because Bitcoin is governed by an algorithm and you can see how it works, you can trust that its governance will follow a predictable path. 25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes, 21 million Bitcoins in total, and everyone can be a shareholder simply by adopting and buying Bitcoin or earning Bitcoin. So